Thank you. Right, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to the Scrutiny Programme Committee. Today we're looking at tourism and businesses in the Swansea area. So start off with apologies for absence. I think I've got councillors Mike White, Chris Holly and Paxton Hood-Williams. Is anybody else, Bridge? I think there was Gloria Tanner was going to be late, wasn't she?
That's correct, Chair. Hopefully we'll see it.
Okay, thank you for that. Any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests?
Yes, Chair, I think I have to declare. Chair, I own a property which is a holiday let, so I think I will have to declare.
So you're declaring a personal interest, Wendy, yes?
Yes, I am.
Okay, fair enough. Anybody else, Clive?
Yes, Chair, thanks. I declare personal and prejudicial interest in item 6, particular reference to Appendix A, Tourism Working Group Scrutiny Report 2019, of which I would have been cabinet member which accepted that report. So sought advice from legal, and I will be withdrawing from the meeting. Probably applies to item 7 as well, which mentions Q3 budget monitoring 2020-21, when again I was a cabinet member, and for adult social care. And item 8, annual report, again refers to adult social services performance panel, which again I was cabinet member, responding to many of the items that were raised during that year. So
Thank you.
I won't be here for much.
You're staying for the minutes then, Clive?
I'll stay for the minutes.
Okay, thank you. Any other declarations of interest at all? No? Okay, thank you. Anybody want to declare anything on whipped votes and party whips? No? Okay, in that case we'll move on to the minutes of the 13th of July, which relates to our scrutiny on highways, engineering, infrastructure repairs and maintenance. So I should go through for accuracy on page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, and page 5. Everyone happy with those? Yeah, I'm going to take silence as assent. Okay, then move on to public question time. I don't believe we've had any public questions received on this particular item for this meeting. So we're going to move on straight on then to item 6, which is the scrutiny of cabinet member portfolio responsibilities, tourism, destination management and marketing, and business and city promotion. So I can welcome Councillor Robert Francis Davis. I believe, Robert, you're supported by Steve Hopkins, the tourism and marketing manager, Fran Jenkins, the strategic manager for tourism, marketing and events, Hugh Mowbray, development and physical regeneration strategic manager, Claire James, economic development manager, and Sue Woodward, inward investment manager. Have I got everybody? Yeah, okay, lovely, thank you. Robert, do you want to make a few words to introduce your reports before we go into questions?
No, I think I let Steve Hopkins on the tourism part present and go through the paper with it. And obviously, any questions that come up, the officers and myself are more than happy to answer any questions on the report. As you know, the reports are brought together from all the different departments to make sure that nothing is left out. And so therefore, I will probably hand over to Steve Hopkins to make a presentation.
Okay, Steve, can you assume we've read the reports and
he'd be shorter than myself, I think.
Yeah, I thought that too. And keep it briefly, Steve. Thanks very much.
Yeah,
Steve.
okay. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity just to present the report. And hopefully it was, I know it probably appeared a little bit different to perhaps what you used to, but you know, in terms of our service, it's very important to be creative, and to demonstrate that in a report is sometimes very difficult. So, but hopefully we got over the essence of the creativity and innovation within the team in terms of trying to market the destination of what has been a really, you know, crucial and critical time for a sector that's still significant importance to the local economy. I think, you know, the report continues to outline the importance in financial terms, in terms of the financial contribution it brings to the economy, along with the number of visitors that it brings every year, along with the jobs that it supports, which has probably been one of the most significant changes really with the sector, with the impact that COVID has on, you know, the employment opportunities and the employment challenges that businesses have had over the last 15, 16 months. So as we know, you know, since March the 23rd last year, tourism was one of the first sectors to close down, and in some respects there's still some parts of that you know, the economy which are struggling to get back going again. And you know, only last weekend we welcomed back events to the you know, the event sector to you know, to people to enjoy, and you know, that's pretty, you know, much an important part of really what we have to offer in Swansea Bay. So you know, like I say, the report highlights some of the impacts that it's had, but then the fact that, you know, we had a destination management plan previously, which I think I presented back in 2019, and which we received you know, a number of questions and challenges on. But you know, for us, over the last 15 months, it's been very much you know, our focus to revisit really what the priorities needed to be in order to support the industry with regards to the priorities for us to move forward really as a council in supporting sector, but also for businesses to make sure that when restrictions were lifted, you know, they were able to respond. And let's face it, we were faced with a scenario that we've never experienced before, where we were telling people not to visit the area, which is completely, you know, goes against the grain in terms of what we want from you know, tourism to actually be, not only for visitors to the area, but for residents as well. You know, we had 6-mile lockdowns where, you know, you couldn't really go much further than enjoying your own local community, which for a lot of people did open a lot of eyes really in terms of what, you know, natural assets they had on their own doorstep. So you know, that was very much you know, a challenging part, telling people not to come in a way really, which it wasn't, you know, sort of inflammatory, because there was this England-Wales divide because of the change in nature of the restrictions that were in place. You know, the frequency in which they were coming out and the sort of programming of those restrictions never really coincided between England and Wales, and that did create conflict at times. So you know, we identified 3 strategic priorities which we've highlighted, one of which was really making sure that we understood what was happening in the marketplace in terms of what visitors were feeling and experiencing. We did a lot of work with Visit Wales with its sentiment analysis, which was trying to understand how people felt about when they were ready to return to go on holiday, so that when we were targeting people, we were doing it at the right time. We weren't doing it too soon when everyone was saying, I haven't been double jabbed yet, there's no way I'm going on holiday until I feel it's safe to do so. So that meant, you know, maybe just holding back on some of the marketing. We also then, probably one of the most important things that we really have focused on over the last 15 months is maintaining that dialogue with private sector. Let's face it, but you know, okay, we've got the natural assets, which, you know, undoubtedly are one of the major reasons to visit, but unless we've got that infrastructure in place, it makes it very difficult for people to actually have a good experience within the destination. So we had to make sure that businesses who were shut down at the time, obviously from March onwards, they had the support from the council, which was quite significant from support that from other colleagues on this Teams meeting this afternoon were able to provide in terms of grants, loans, business rates, etc., but also the tourism team acting as that point of contact really to understand what the change in restrictions meant to them as businesses in terms of licensing, operation, when they couldn't open, and when was the right time for them to start applying for all the grants that we were either providing ourselves directly or we were administering on behalf of Welsh Government. So that was a key part of what we were doing, and it did lead to a huge amount of interaction and engagement with businesses right across the destination, and probably people that we haven't spoken to in the past. You know, all of a sudden they were having a really good interaction with the council, ultimately because we were handing out money, advising them how they could apply for grants, but ultimately it was guiding them through what was proving to be one of the most difficult times that they've ever operated in. So the business support angle was a key priority, but then of course we have to make sure that we were maintaining that conversation with people, albeit they couldn't visit, but we were reminding them of the things that, when they could come back, when the time was right, that, there were lots of things that, that they needed to do. So our campaigns were very much about, reminding them of that. And, what has helped significantly is the support the council has been able to give in terms of the private sector with regards to that marketing platform. As you know, we normally would charge the private sector to be part of an annual campaign with us, but council took the decision to actually support the recovery of the private sector with free advertising for the year. So that has seen a considerable upturn in terms of the number of businesses now that we're now working with. So when we are talking to customers, it's nice to talk about new things rather than the same old businesses that we've been working with for a number of years. So lots of new operators coming in, taking advantage of that opportunity, and therefore from a storytelling point of view, from a PR point of view, we've been able to talk about new things. The other key point I just wanted to make in terms of strategic priorities, the third one is around about reminding these customers when the time is right to come back, and we've already started that. Obviously from July this year, we've got campaigns that are now running well into the year. We all know one of the big challenges with tourism is making the season last. We don't just want lots of people coming here in July and August. We know they will come in July and August, but our campaigns are very much stretched right into early spring already for next year in terms of understanding, what these potential visitors to the area are, or returning visitors. But we wanted to come throughout the year, so that's been key to reminding them that if they're not coming now, maintaining that dialogue to make sure that the content that we provide with them, the product offer that we've got, is one that is constantly refreshing, and therefore probably another reason for them to come and visit, because we know staycations continue to be one of the the main probably chance that people will have to holiday in 2021. So the report sort of highlights a lot of the campaign activity we're doing, and already some of the performance, because obviously from a marketing point of view, unless we can monitor it, unless we can track it, we don't undertake it as activity. That's one way of us sort of maintaining that the spend that we've got for marketing is measurable in terms of the targets that we set within our marketing plan. So a lot of the information is there. With regards to the performance against previous years, obviously we haven't measured this year against last year, because obviously last year was just in terms of engagement and numbers and activity was way down. But in terms of 2019, we are showing an incredible increase in the amount of traffic to the website, the amount of information people are consuming, the amount of engagement that people are having on social media when we're reminding them, if they haven't already planned, booked or traveled to the area, that there are still the usual things for them to see. But obviously with all these new businesses now forming part of our activity, that there's lots of new things to see, and already starting to tell a story about what's happening as well in the city centre, because people won't have been for over 15 months, and naturally the developments of Copper Bay, the new arena and the surrounding areas, very much linking the city with the sea, is obviously having a major impact in terms of the next lot of stories that we'll be able to tell people. And probably a lot of you would have seen over the last week or so is the article in The Guardian, which had much circulation within social media. We had fantastic coverage there, where we worked with the private sector and hosted a journalist over a weekend, and the coverage that we've had for that has been significant in terms of it's a publication, The Guardian, obviously, which a lot of people will recognise, a lot of people will acknowledge that the article is one, when it's written by a third party as opposed to coming directly from us, there's a far more lot of credentials really in terms of the article that's written. So there's a hell of a lot of information in there on how we've been monitoring and tracking visitors. The report also shows you some of the creative that we've been using at various times of the year, and introduces our campaign for this year, which is all about the happy place, where people returning back to their happy place within the destination, getting them to, share that information online. One of the videos, the first happy place video, has already seen over 300,000 views on YouTube. So when you consider where we were perhaps, 7 years ago, where we had a printed guide and we were producing 75,000 of those, digital allows us to reach far more people, and it's our job really to reach them, but also to get them to interact with, either our social media channels or the website, and get them then to view all the, the things that people can see, do, and stay on holiday in Swansea Bay. The strategy, is very much about delivering on the outcomes, and as I said, we've identified those priorities. We've got targets in against them all. The outcomes are very much about strengthening the local economy post-COVID, kind of renewing the visitor confidence in the area, that they can come any time of the year now. Obviously, with a lot of our product being outdoors, it does give extra incentives for people to return. Hopefully increasing the number of bookings. Early indications are that the recovery has started for some parts of the sector. We know from the occupancy rates that we do with hotels, certainly for the month of June, the occupancy levels for the city centre hotels were about 60 to 70%, which is great when you think that they're just coming out of recovery, and probably some people still a little bit skeptical about whether they wanted to go and stay in a hotel, for example, because there were still restrictions in place. But at the end of the day, the outcomes that we've identified are relevant to the resources that we got. Those resources have been boosted from the Economic Recovery Fund, where we were encouraged to apply for some additional resources. I'm pleased to say that all 4 of the things that we applied for were approved. So that's a grant that will support the sector in terms of enabling businesses to improve their accommodation offer and therefore get a better star grading. We've got an outdoor media campaign that will run in spring next year. That will give the sector a real boost at a critical time of the year, because the industry generally say if they have a good Easter, they generally have a good year. So we want to make a great start to the year for them. We've also got the marketing partner fees, hopefully approved for them to be waived again for next year, which is vital. And of course, to deliver this as well, we've been given some extra resources to enable some part-time staff to manage these projects and deliver them during the course of the recovery period. There are some appendices within the report, which hopefully you've been able to have a look at. We thought it was probably an ideal time to share with you the recovery plan that was approved by Cabinet as part of the Council's wider economic recovery plan, which we were delighted to contribute towards. And it does feature quite heavily. And there's some examples then within the appendices really of the PR coverage that we've managed to generate, which a lot of you may or may not seen, but it does give you an idea really of the value of somebody sort of independent and impartial to the area actually writing so positively really about a destination as a result of their hosted visit that we've put on. I think I've tried to summarize the report as briefly as quickly as I can, and certainly I'm open to any questions that any of the panel may have.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Steve. As we've got 2 reports, I'm proposing to deal with the tourism one first and then move on to the business ones following on from that. So you've actually answered my question, which I was going to ask about the recovery fund, but I've got a question here from Mike White, who wasn't able to be at the meeting today. So I'm going to read it out for him instead. Mike wants to know, are there any particular timescales or deadlines that we have to work to when it comes to marketing and promoting Swansea as a tourism destination, and what audience are we trying to target?
And it's a great question. Our aim is to make sure that the season is extended, particularly now more than ever. And we've got an events program that is looking at attracting people well into the autumn and the winter. And I mentioned about how important the spring campaign was. So we are already well into delivering a campaign that will attract people during the autumn, and likewise with some of the activity now, that the content that we're producing and curating now ready for the launch of a spring campaign. In terms of the market, the visitor survey that we did in 2019 hasn't really changed over the years. The only real significant change is that we are now doing a little bit more in Wales marketing, because we are receiving more people from within Wales that are visiting the area. We're seeing that in our the analytics that we're getting on the website, and we are, noticing that from the engagement that we're having on social media. So Wales is now an important part of our marketing activity, along with the usual suspects of the southwest of England, the M4 corridor, and the Midlands. They remain the key markets that we're reaching out to visit. Sorry, Councillor Black, he was on mute then.
Yeah, sorry, I'm on mute, yes. I'm working my way through the questions from the pre-meeting. But Robert, do you want to come in to answer this question as well?
Yeah, only briefly, Peter. The staycation market has increased tremendously now. And in fact, you might have noticed me going on my mobile phone earlier on, and he was the chairman, ironically, of the Swansea Bay, the tourism, who's been working very closely with us and trying to press where we can perhaps extend the season. I think people will enjoy Gower, whether it's in the height of the summer or even just looking out over a bay at rough seas and things like that. People enjoy it all the year round now. And we are looking and working, talking to the planning department as well, where people can stay, right the way around for holidays, and I would emphasize for holidays, whether it's short breaks or a week, 2 weeks. But I think that is very important as well. And I think I've never seen such a dejected at times tourism officers telling people not to come. And we love to see you, but can you see us later on when it's safer to do so? So the message went out very strongly. But I've got to praise the staff, the way during this pandemic, not only being doing their own job, but other jobs as well. And, it hasn't been easy. And right through the pandemic, never mind what department it is in the council, I think they've all raised, come up to the challenge of helping Swansea right the way through and making sure that there's a valuable product left in Swansea after the pandemic. And we're seeing that you look at the number plates on the cars, and there's lots of number plates which aren't Welsh number plates driving around Swansea at the moment. So it is an extended season.
Yeah, thanks for that, Robert. I always say Gower's best in the autumn anyway, which very conveniently leads on to Peter Jones's questions. Peter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My comments and questions relate, of course, to the July update on the working group on tourism report that, of course, dates back to 2019. I'd like to thank the Cabinet member and officers for the detail in the update, and also, of course, for the more general report that we've been discussing. I think the overall picture shows a very impressive commitment on the part of officers in the Cabinet to maximising the attraction of Swansea and the Gower, of course, in particular, to outside and inside visitors. However, of course, I noticed when I went through the report, Appendix A, that 3 recommendations that went to Cabinet back in 2019, numbers 6, 7 and 9, were missing from the update. And of course, those 3 recommendations had been rejected for various reasons by Cabinet at the time. And I was a little disappointed, I have to say, that given that we're a scrutiny committee, that they weren't included in the update report, but that's by the by. Looking at those 3 recommendations in particular, if I may, recommendation 6, which was concerned about a kind of a one-stop shop phone line availability, a phone line for availability of accommodation. I think the response from Cabinet was that increasingly, of course, people are relying on direct online access, and I think that was probably a sensible and reasonable response, and I wouldn't want to pursue that. Also, of course, recommendation 9, which related to ring-fencing some part of car parking receipts at appropriate sites. There may be views that others hold, but I'm not going to go to the barricades. Well, I never go to the barricades, but I'm certainly not going to the barricades over that one. However, I am concerned about recommendation 7, which concerned a suggestion from the panel to work with environmental NGOs to see whether we can find ways of attracting their memberships to Gower, people who may not, and Swansea more generally, people who may not be fully aware of the environmental offer that we have in our area. And just by way of introduction, if you'll forgive me, I found myself reading a booklet by Tony Juniper, some of you will be aware of, What Nature Does for Britain. And he makes 2 useful points in there. This was written in 2015, but I think the figures are still highly relevant and probably even higher than when he wrote at the time. That 17% of all UK tourism trips involved nature or wildlife watching in some form or other. And as he says, a proportion that has been steadily rising. So the importance of ecotourism can hardly be exaggerated in terms of that measure. He also notes that, quote, more than 10% of the UK adult population are members of environmental organisations of one kind or another, both big and small. And that's even before you include the National Trust. If you include the National Trust, it's approaching more like 20% of the adult population. So we're talking there about a big market in terms of people who, in terms of their tourism, are interested in environmental issues or potentially interested in environmental issues. And therefore, I noted from the original response, to quote, that ecotourism, quote, is not a market we are in a position to currently actively promote. And of course, the focus goes on to say that the focus was on, quote, commercial partnerships and so forth. Okay, I understand the bit about the commercial partnerships, but I think we're missing a trick, quite frankly, if we don't work to identify in particular this, well, to some extent, untapped market for ecotourism. Of course, many of the people who come to Gower and Swansea Bay area are doing so precisely because they're attracted by environmental aspects of it. But those who are members of particular green NGOs and who have a particular interest in particular forms of wildlife, be it be birds, be it be sea life or whatever, I think we ought really to try to work with these national organisations to see whether through them that we can get to their members. Now, I understand obviously from privacy considerations and so forth that we can't ask them to hand over their membership lists. I'm not suggesting that for one moment, but they do produce magazines, they do write to their members, they do publicise wildlife activities that their members might wish to participate in. And it seems to me, therefore, that we should be inviting them to consider whether they would be willing in the future now to include in those publications some publicity for ourselves. And I was very impressed by the publicity that Steve referred to in his report. It's very impressive, well done. But I just wonder whether we couldn't be involving organisations like the Wildlife Trusts, the RSPB, the National Trust and others to target an audience that we may already be attracting, and if so, that's great. But I suspect there are people out there that we're not attracting, but who, if we were given the information that I think we can give, could be attracted. So, you know, bearing in mind again, one of the drivers behind the original working group inquiry was ecotourism, and that ecotourism reportedly is a growing market. I would just like to suggest and invite comments, please, in terms of how we might tap that market more successfully. Thank you. Sorry for being so long.
Okay, Steve or Robert?
I can go first, Robert, if
Yeah.
I may. Yeah, in terms of they're very valid points, and as soon as you started talking there, Councillor Jones, I could see an opportunity whereby perhaps as part of our PR contract we couldn't, with presumably some of these publications that they have travel writers within them as well, that, you know, we could target those publications to maybe come down on weekends, just as we do with, you know, some of the, like the broadsheets or the lifestyle magazines, etc. So that's something that we could do instantly. You know, we can explore that opportunity with the agency that we work with on that. In terms of, whilst we don't market ecotourism to a particular audience, being responsible and that environmental message is very much a strong part of the messaging that we have over the last 15 months adopted and continue to adopt. That responsible message is very much part of the key messages that we share with people, reminding them of things about, you know, the countryside codes of conduct, you know, about dog bans, about how, you know, their behavior, about beach fires, beach barbecues, all these things that have been, you know, a lot of people haven't been able to enjoy, and when they have returned that opportunity for them to go out and experience the countryside, we've needed to remind them really of, as you quite rightly point out, the main reasons why people visit our area is very much the wildlife and the countryside. And you know, there was that very much that period, that fallow period during the course of last year, where things were, you know, were breathing, you know, fresh life into, you know, flora, fauna, and the wildlife appearing in places that hadn't appeared for years. So there are some quick wins. If I may go back and revisit that question again and come back with perhaps some ideas about how we might reach out to those groups in the future, then perhaps that might, you know, be welcomed by the Scrutiny Committee as at least us trying to reach out to that particular audience.
Can I just comment on the omission of these these particular recommendations from the appendix? I mean, I think Peter's fair enough on recommendation 6 and recommendation 9, but in the response on recommendation 7, there were actions put in there which the Cabinet were going to follow through. In particular, invite organisations to future destination management stakeholder events to further promote their services and their role in ecotourism.
Yeah.
Continue to develop our own virtual and visitor database, etc., etc. So I think it would have been helpful if those actions had also been referred to in the report in this appendix, so we could see how those actions were being progressed as well.
Okay.
Even though that was not agreed, there were actions coming from that particular recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah. And Robert, did you want to come in, or should I move on to the next question?
No, I'll come in.
Okay.
And like, we can always rely on Peter to bring up and be a champion for the environment. And it's
he's not alone in that, by the way.
No, but I think he's head and shoulders above most.
Yeah.
Look, you know, I was looking at what we actually do on the environment, you know, as a department, and develop new corporate objective for maintaining, enhancing Swansea natural resources and biodiversity. We've taken on a Section 6 officer, a post has been created, which I know Peter was very strong on. Grant projects worth 2.1 million have been delivered by the Countryside Access, as that was 659,000, the AUNB another 565,000. The Nature Conservation Teams, 905,000. You know, we are working with lots of groups. The Gower A&B Design Guide, for instance, has now come out. Conservation management of Clyde Valley Park have been undertaken, including heritage interpretation, access and biodiversity improvements. Kemfrin implementation of highway works to reduce visitor impacts. I could go on, I got pages of this. I won't do all that now, but there's a tremendous amount. And the tourism team work closely with Deb Hill's department there, who produce a brochure every year of the amount of events that are put on throughout Swansea, highlighting biodiversity, etc. Unfortunately, the last 17 months have been pretty difficult with a pandemic, and the brochure they got out wasn't able to be distributed, this year, because lots of events were being cancelled. Not that people wanted to cancel events, but we had no option but to cancel these events because of Welsh Government instructions, and for people to enjoy, but enjoy safely is the message that has been going out. And whenever we are promoting anything from that department, work closely with the tourism department, who will actually push it and publicise it. Obviously, it's limited budget, but within that budget, I do think it's a good idea to work with, and which we do, National Trust and others. But I'm sure all those members of those organisations are probably reading the articles that came out from The Guardian as well, because that's, across the piece of everybody looking at it. But we take the point, and I think it's something that we can look at and promoting further.
Okay. Sue, you've got a question on...
Sorry, Chair, could I just come back quickly, if I may?
Oh, yes, sorry,
on this
Peter.
issue? Simply to say, particularly in relation to Steve Hopkins, I'd be like to have a chat with you, Steve, away from this meeting. I can put you in touch with a number of people, particularly in the RSPB, who might well be interested. But the RSPB produces a quarterly magazine nationally, by which I mean the UK, but also a special magazine that goes out quarterly across Wales. And it might be that they would welcome an article that they would be willing to put in. But if we could talk away from the meeting, I'd be grateful. And thank you to Robert for your comments. Thank you both. Thank you.
Okay. Right, Sue Jones, you had a meeting question on terms of Gower Commoners Safety Action Group.
Thank you. I also have a question on the Gower cycling and the connections in North Gower regarding the railway station at Gowerton, and wondered if that was being promoted as, again, ecotourism, following on from what Peter is saying, because that's an opportunity, I think, with the train station in our area. That was one question. And then it was your relationship with some of the groups around Gower. I'm thinking particularly of Gower Safety Action Group, where they are concerned about the number of animals that are being killed by cars, and wondered if that was promoted through tourism as an option for Gower. Thank you.
Well, I don't know. When I look at cycling that as a portfolio, although like something like 46% of our tourists like to go walking in Gower and cycling, etc. The road safety would come under Councillor Mark Thomas's portfolio, and so therefore any talks with those people would go through him. Obviously, anybody coming to Swansea, we want to be safe, but it would be Councillor Mark Thomas that would deal with cycling and the safety aspect.
Okay, and the railway station?
Well, if I could pick up on the railway station, obviously we work with First Great Western to promote the route into Swansea, into Swansea High Street Station and beyond. We don't specifically market Gowerton Station, although, as you know, Councillor Jones is well known to me, just being up the road. But I know that businesses within the area do take advantage of the fact that, some of the new businesses in the village have and do mention it because of their part of their sustainable transport message on their website. So, we know Nomads, for example, they're very keen on attracting cyclists off the cycle network, as well as using the station as a means to, getting safely to and from their business during the day, night, without the need perhaps to taking the cars and therefore taking a bit of the strain off the local community in particular, and maybe some of the parking problems that that we occasionally get in the village.
Can I just come back on that?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Thank you. I just wondered about bike hire at the station, which would promote the access down to Penclawdd and further on. So that would be an option that maybe we could promote within North Gower.
Yeah, certainly if there was an operator that came forward that was willing to take it on as a commercial opportunity, then we would try and work with them as much as possible in providing as much information, research, potentially access the grants, because we know there are lots of grants now for new businesses starting up. But with regards to you know, sort of promoting it, yeah, they'd be a marketing partner with us as well. So we would certainly encourage that. We know how busy the cycle link is now anyway, between you know, between Gowerton and that connection then across to down to Lacha. So it is a very busy and important link. And something really that from a sustainability point of view, we want to encourage more of safe cycling off-road as well. And I think as Councillor Francis Davies said there, you know, the council has invested significantly in the cycle network. But whilst I'm all about tourism isn't all about us, and we are reliant on and continue to work with a lot of sections within the council to make sure that, you know, all these things that do impact upon the visitor economy are picked up by colleagues, and it's fair to say most of them are generally.
It occurs to me on the bikes that we have the bikes on the front, of course, which are able to rent. Was it possible maybe to look at expanding those to North Gower as well?
Well, the money's got to be available. If it wasn't for Swansea Council, this was a scheme that came out of the university. It was fundraising. And I think if it wasn't for the council putting the money in, that would not have happened. They down to mumbles. As regards cycle paths, out of grant, out of Welsh Government last year, over 50% came to Swansea. We have more miles of cycle paths than any other city in Britain, you know, pro rata, which I was quite amazed at that, but I was informed that by Sustrans. So it's, I'm sure they're right. I wasn't aware of that previously, but it is, you know, a lot of cycle paths. And I think where it's commercial, people will, you know, we would encourage to work with people to set up those businesses where people can hire bikes.
Okay. Okay, Sue.
Thank you.
Alexander.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor and officers as well. Just to comment, really, I happen to work in IT, and after reading through the report and the appendices and everything, I just wondered whether or not you might be able to speak to the subject of virtual tourism being a growth area at the moment, and what your plans are, because I couldn't see a reference in there at the moment.
We haven't got any specific plans to deal with it as a subject. What we tend to do with virtual tourism is kind of rely on third-party providers, really, and then we will share that content. So, for example, I don't know if CADU are doing a virtual event at one of their venues, which perhaps in the past has not been, you know, it's not open to the general public. They may do a virtual tour of areas of a particular facility that aren't necessarily accessible to the general public. So we haven't got anything specifically in terms of that, Councillor Roberts. But you know what we do have in terms of the content that we produce, we do have a lot of video content. So where, and I know this isn't technically, answering the question, but in terms of bringing the product, the offer that we have to that audience, we do it through numerous video contracts that we work on as part of the campaigns each year, so that that sense of being in this destination, albeit through a laptop, computer, or mobile phone, is very much brought to life through that video content that we work with the private sector to develop.
Okay, Robert, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, no.
Let Robert come in first, Alexander.
I think one thing that we've learned during lockdown and this pandemic is getting much greater skills on technology of having Teams meetings, and I would like to see a much greater development. In my portfolio, there's museums, galleries, archives. We look at our parks. But I think we can all do better. You know, in fact, I think we can all do much better. Swansea Castle, for instance, you look at Swansea Castle, I would like to see a QR code that most people have smartphones these days. They could just, they can either log on online and see the history of Swansea Castle, or with their smartphone, they can pick up the QR code and actually get the history when they stand in there and looking at it. The same with the Swansea Valley, the work we're doing around the Copper Kingdom up there, as we call it locally. I think there's so much history. We were, and the metallurgical industries of the Swansea Valley they're the top in the world, and we really need to tell that story to the people that live here, our school children, our visitors, and that's quite easily done with a QR code. Doesn't cost a fortune, and I think that everybody should be working far closer together to tell the story of our heritage. Like I'd like us to sometimes start possibly a campaign. Let's get the Red Lady of Paviland, which was a man, by the way, but they are stuck in a box somewhere in Oxford. Like the Elgin marbles should be returned to Athens. Why can't we have the Red Lady of Paviland returned to Swansea? I'll start the campaign here and now, and that we should be looking for that. But then tell the story
on that one.
Pardon?
I think Johan Richards beating you to it on that one.
No, but we can tell that story, and we should be getting interpreting it so that people know about it. So much history that I would agree. We got our funds, and perhaps that is getting a group to work together to apply for the funds. And there's our museums, heritage, to put that together. So okay. I would agree fully.
Can I take it, Robert, you're actually rolling out a QR program then as cabinet member?
Funding available. I would love to see a QR.
You just told me it's very cheap.
Pardon?
You just told me it was a really cheap way of doing it.
Well, a lot of it can be cheap,
Okay.
If you've got the knowledge to put a QR code up, you can do it. We have our archives department, which are very good. So the information is there. We've got our museums that could be put in the story
absolutely,
together.
Yeah.
So I think if we put the story together, the QR code, it should be quite easy to put out. And in fact, I'd like, even if people go into the art gallery and you see paintings, that you can pick up a QR code to tell people, the background of the painting, when it was painted, who painted it. I think that we can go forward greatly on this, and I've already talked to officers to be able to start on this.
We'll keep an eye on the developments of that then, and ask you to come back and tell us more about it as you develop it. Alexander, do you want to come back, or are you okay?
Just to thank for the responses, and it's really encouraging to hear thinking outside the box, that extra mile, and there's reference to upskilling. That's really encouraging. Thank you.
Okay, Lyndon.
Great, thank you, Chair. Yeah, a couple of things, Steve. I can see you're really passionate about selling Swansea, and it must have been a killer for you when you were telling people don't come yet, because it's not safe. I think you mentioned the UK market, the Welsh market, but one thing I'd remind us about is the local market as well, because I joined your team at the Gower show, the last Gower show you actually go to, and hopefully we will next summer, but you were a camper van there with a team of people, and they were selling it to local people. And I tell you what, a lot of people, because I stood with them for quite a while, and they were saying that they were picking up a lot of local people who didn't know what was around in their local area. And I think we found this out as well during the pandemic, where people were finding out things locally that they didn't know existed. So that is worth pursuing as well, because as you did at that show, and the team you had there, they were doing a fantastic job. But that is something that really needs pursuing. The other thing is, I was asked the other day for some maps of our footpaths to illustrate where they were, and we haven't really got anything in Swansea where we've got our footpaths on a map or whatever. And I think that is something we are missing a trick, because people can come here for, if you like, green holidays, and enjoy those footpaths, but there's no specific sort of map that they can get. And we managed to put one or two together for some local businesses in my ward, but you know, that is something possibly we are missing out on, and people can enjoy those sort of green sort of holidays. The only thing I would say, which is a disappointment, is the fact that is the state of, when we get all these people coming, is the state of some of our public toilets. I have to say, I know I've seen Will on the in this meeting, Will Thomas, and I know that Caswell, Langland, and Mumbles, there are continual complaints. Now we know there is a programme to renovate them, and through pressure, I've met with the person dealing with that and the chief executive on a number of occasions, and they have actually upped the cleaning regime. But even that needs to be better. And I think in some cases, probably a few litres of Parazone wouldn't go amiss. But that we are letting ourselves down by not getting those into that top, to getting them into top condition, even as a temporary measure before they're renovated, which I know is the plan. And finally, the Red Lady of Paviland, I can remember Byron Davis, when he was the MP, took that up about 6 years ago. It certainly is something that we should have, and they're now stored in a box, whatever, in Oxford, and I think they should be back in Swansea. I agree with you, Robert. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, Robert.
Yeah, I don't think Peter Jones would agree, mind, with bottles of Parazone going getting into the water course. So I'll do his job for him there. Look, in the tourism department, we've been on for a long time, for many, many years. But we need to improve. People judge our tourism destinations by the quality of whether bins are empty, whether beaches are clean, whether the toilets are clean. The tourism department keep on year after year after year, and they've probably been doing that for about the last 20 years. So look, I wish, as has been said previously, the only thing you should leave on a beach is your footprints. And the trouble is, people are leaving far too much on it. People, even when the bin is full, they still try to get more into something that can't be done and just leave it lying around. We would love to see better toilets and clean. And I know the leader has put more money into the budget to get the teams getting around cleaner. Our beach destinations now are being more popular than ever because of travel and the staycations. But I hope that we can get the standards up. But I think we'll always need to get standards going higher.
Okay. Steve, did you want to come in quickly?
Well, just thanking Councillor Jones for his kind comments about the camper van. That was a funded, a Visit Wales funded campaign that we had very much in the destination, which was specifically reminding people about what things they could see and do within Swansea Bay. But it also went throughout Wales, and we went over to Ireland as well, which is again another key market for the area, but probably one that we haven't been tapping into of late because of restrictions on travel. Councillor Francis Davies mentioned about the toilets. I'm pleased to say there is a strategy in place now, and we had our first officer working group meeting yesterday, so there is some progress on that. With regards to footpaths and rights of way, we'll certainly have a word with colleagues in Countryside about that, about how we can perhaps bring forward more obvious resources that people can use locally. And I just put into the chat about this challenge during lockdown that we had in terms of that 6-mile radius where people could only venture really from their doorsteps. We had a campaign running called the Doorstep Detectives, and it was just reminding people really of things that were on their doorstep that they've taken for granted over the years, we're just bringing that to life really, and reminding them that some of the landmarks, some of the points of interest that they perhaps haven't experienced for a long time weren't too far away, and that I've put in the link there to all the content that we produced during lockdown for that. So thank you.
It occurs to me on the Red Lady of Paviland that if the museum were to put on an exhibition around that, and they would certainly be able to bring it to Swansea for the purposes of that exhibition. So I'm sure that's not beyond us and shouldn't be too expensive and could be fitting with the normal museum budget. But I'll leave you with that thought rather than ask you to comment on it, Robert.
Well, we do get a programme for the museum put together a year in advance, but I've actually taken it up already with Barry, our curator at Swansea University. And
that'd be good, yeah. Okay, Wendy Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair. I've got about 3 questions, I think, that I will ask. One is very specific to the report, Appendix 1, page 5. The bedstock survey is referred to, and I just wondered what is included in this survey. Obviously hotels, but do you go out to holiday companies to ask what bedstocks they have on their books? I assume you do. I just wondered if you could comment on that. And then something that has interested me somewhat is that the Welsh Government have potentially suggested that there could be legislation over the next 5 years relating to a tourist tax on overnight visitors staying in Wales. I just wondered if any thought had been given to the potential damage that this could do. And, you know, presumably it will be at a cost to the tourist centres across Wales. So just a general query, has this been looked at and are there any views? And then another general question. I recall that a few years ago now, there was something set up called the Celtic Wave project. And I think the Welsh Government coughed up about 1.2 million to get this off the ground. And this was with the intention of making the Irish Sea a destination for cruise liners. And there were 6 ports that were cited as being worth a visit, of which Swansea was one. Now, obviously, things have been difficult during COVID, although it appears there are cruise ships now going up the Irish Sea, as it were, to Liverpool and coming back again to Southampton. So there is an opportunity, I would have thought. So I just wondered if there had been any investigation, any look at the residue of this quite expensive investment in terms of what the future might hold for it, or has it just disappeared into the ether, as we say?
Okay.
So thanks. Any comments? I would like to hear.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. That's I might need to come to you because you've got a wonderful memory when I forget things in the future, I think. So certainly on the first point with bedstock, yes, we've done the survey. We completed it at the end of March. It is very much, as you highlighted, reviewing all the available bed spaces right across the city and county of Swansea. That includes camping spaces, caravan sites, B&B, self-catering, hotels, etc. We're working with IT at the moment on a new database so that we can interrogate that data in a far more intuitive way and then be able to work with colleagues in planning economic development in terms of understanding what that total number of bed spaces it is and how it's changed over the years. So, whether there've been any noticeable changes with serviced accommodation in the city centre or camp spaces on Gower. So that's something very much in hand with colleagues in the team, and our IT department are working with us on that. With regard to tourism tax, I can answer one part of the question. I think it's probably more for politicians to answer the second part. Certainly the first part is that the private sector were aware of it a few years ago, and it was very much booted into touch because they were very much against it. A tourism tax, another levy on top of all the other taxes that they currently have to pay. What the political view is on a tourism tax, that's not for me to answer, but certainly I'm sure if it does resurrect its, as a discussion point in the future, then certainly we will have a view on it from the cabinet member and from the council. The Celtic Wave, again, you're right, it was a 3 ports in Wales, 3 ports in Ireland, working together to promote the Irish Sea. It was ABP working with us for the port of Swansea, Milford Haven and Anglesey, along with Cork, Waterford and Dublin. Then in terms of promoting that channel, we had some success from it. At the end of the day, we are restricted as to what cruise ships can come into Swansea. The lock gates there don't allow for large ships. However, we can get small cruise ships in, and we had 2, didn't we, during the last month where, doing that round Britain tours, they did call into the port of Swansea and had a very managed control tour of Gower as well, as part of their opportunity to get off the ship. But of course, with COVID measures in place, there wasn't a lot we could do in terms of taking them any further afield than that. Welsh Government are still pushing the cruise agenda, but we're very much in the hands of ABP, whose resources, as you know, are currently sort of fully utilised in rebuilding the pier wall at the moment. And I don't think their appetite for attracting cruise ships is ideal at the moment for Swansea, when generally a lot of the cruise ships will visit the ports of Milford Haven, Pembroke Dock and Anglesey from a Wales point of view. But when they do come in, the little resource that we have, we throw everything at it to make sure that those passengers do get a good welcome when they arrive.
Wasn't there talk some years ago about the Mumbles Pier development, including cruise docking?
It was, yeah, an alongside berth along the pier.
Yeah.
That is if they could have rebuilt it. I think the pier I don't know the technical term, but I'm not sure whether the improvements that they currently got now enable a cruise ships to come alongside the pier and then from the disembark there. But that would have been ideal. But certainly we know we've got a lot to offer. And even if they arrive in Swansea and maybe go to Gower, maybe go down to West Wales or whatever, the ambition is still there from our point of view to work with ABP on it.
I think it was certainly an ambition of theirs, wasn't this? Robert?
Look, I would love to see cruise ships coming into Swansea, but if they were to tie up in at the pier, I think it would probably just pull it down. Yeah. These cruise ships, the cruise ships that came into Swansea, I think is a maximum of something like 30,000 tonne that can go through the lock gates to get into Swansea port. I'm going on a cruise in 3 weeks' time, and that ship will be 190,000 tonne. So to give you an idea of, with 17 stories high, they're not small modern cruise ships, and that I would love to see it. And in fact, I met with Visit Wales a few weeks back, and when the tidal lagoon comes, I would love to see a cruise destination on the outside of that, tying up to the lagoon. And I think that is something that is worth investigating and pursuing. And that, if we can get the cruise ships coming in, I've been on many cruises, and when I've gone into one day, I was at into Naples, there was 3 cruise ships berthing there at the same time. And the total passengers alone from those 3 cruise ships were 15,000 people, all going into Naples at the same time. Well, you can imagine the spend on those people in that city. That's without the crew going aboard as well. So there's normally about 1 member crew for every 3 people. So it'd be another 5,000 members of crew. So that's 20,000 people pulling up into Naples at the same time on that one day. So look, I think it's worth pursuing. As regards to tax, well, it's not a matter for us to scrutinise Welsh Government. So if Councillor Fitzgerald, I suggest you writes to about that. It hasn't been on the agenda for a long time. She immediately assumed it would be a bad thing. I don't think any government wants to put things that are bad things forward. For 20 years, I never took a summer holiday. I went to Austria skiing, and there was a tourist tax there, which done very well for Austria. Now, I'm not saying I'm for it, I'm not saying against it. Should it come forward, we will look at it, consult with the trade and others, and then respond accordingly. but it's not on the agenda at this moment in time.
Okay. Will
just
Thomas,
a point of Chad. Yeah, oh, it's my turn anyway. Just a point of
Yeah.
information on the Mumbles cruise. As far as I understood it, it was a pilot which would go from like boats which would travel people from Mumbles to the cruise ships.
Right.
And they would get off on a smaller boat. So that's what I understand. And they'd come up the old lifeguard station. I think that was part of the proposal.
Yeah, like when the
thanks.
World came in, Will, sorry to break in, is that when the World cruise ship came in, I think they were tendering people ashore, and that many cruise boats do that, and I think that could be an answer as well.
okay,
Yeah.
sorry, we'll carry on.
And I very much like the idea at the end of the lagoon. I think that's a good idea. Just touching on a couple of things, really. What Sue mentioned earlier about the bike scheme. I think maybe the COVID relief money, I'm not sure if, that's something that can be used for things like that. It's very popular in Mumbles. As Robert said, the Swansea Council helped pay for some of the bike scheme, and Mumbles Community Council actually paid for the hub in half the hub in Mumbles. So, it's very popular. There's always people using the Santander bikes. I know there's a time limit. I think it's probably another year or so left on the support Santander we're giving that. So I think that is worth looking at expanding and keeping that going, because it's a very good resource. Unfortunately, we do see quite a lot of the bikes going further afield without probably enough infrastructure and information about where they should and can be going. You often see some people getting lost, but that's the nature of it. On roads without helmets, for example, I mean. So the other thing I just wanted to ask Steve, really, we've spoken about cleanliness, and I think the council, personally, do a fantastic job at litter picking on the beaches. During lockdown, we had a huge amount of litter on Langland Beach, especially, and I know we did in just off Singleton there as well. And the council, although they're not down there, 5 o'clock in the morning, there's always someone there earlier. They are there. They do a great job. There was volunteers helping as well, but the council are always there every morning. They do a good job. So I'm sort of happy, and I think we do a good job at keeping the beaches clean. What I would say, Lyndon brought up the toilets. The toilets is something that needs improving. It is those little things that can ruin a holiday. You go to the toilet, you're having a great time, and the toilet's dirty, and it's ruined your holiday. And I often think that we miss a trick. We're not linking the infrastructure and tourism enough. For example, you go down Langland at the moment, again, not the council's fault, but there's a burst water main drain with four bollards around it. That's Welsh Water. Council is working with Welsh Water. Then you go down, there's lots of weeds all over the place. Now, I know Peter might say that's for pollinators, of course. We don't want to necessarily get rid of all the weeds everywhere, but in a place where we're trying to attract tourism, these are crucial things. You go down Wasili, the fence that separates the dunes, and I know that's private land, but that's all falling apart. And infrastructure, I think, needs to be linked in with our tourism plan a bit more personally, or I'd like to ask you how you do that. I'll give you another example. I'm going down past Park Mill in the summer when it's busy. If a caravan's coming through that narrow patch, you could be waiting 20 minutes there because there's cars reversing, and is it worth temporary traffic lights at summer holidays, or is it, is there something else that can be done? There's lots of I could go on about individual little things, but cleanliness, weeding, all these things, just keeping the streets clean, I think it's hugely important, and you see a lot more emphasis on it, in my opinion, in sort of Cornwall, Pembrokeshire, places like that. So that's my question, really, how you linked in with that. And the other one for the cabinet member, obviously we put the pin notices out for the bay sites, and just interested, maybe Hugh's best to answer that, but it seems like we sort of dangle these carrots and say, oh, this is what we're interested in doing, and then nothing seems to happen with those bay sites or those priorities for the council, those things that can improve tourism. And for me, it seemed quite simple to do. There's several sites along the bay. Why aren't we developing them? So that's another question there, please.
Okay, I think on the infrastructure, recommendation 8 of Peter Jones's group very much talked about getting that coordination between the cleanliness issues and the thing, and there is a response in the appendix there. Steve, do you want to come up on these? You're muted at the moment.
Apologies. Yeah, thanks. And yeah, they are frustrations. I think we all, we all take on board, really. I think in terms of how we make the improvements, the visitor survey highlights or raises questions about how important these things are and how we're doing in terms of our performance. And then we produce a grid to show where we need to actually focus our resources and attention. And the way that we've done that up until March 23rd last year was through the destination management plan. We had 2 working groups. We had a public realm and infrastructure group, which brought together all the representatives from the different services within the council that have an opportunity to address some of these things that you've highlighted, Councillor Thomas, as well as there was that one working group, and there was a marketing subgroup as well. So I think when we look at how we come out of the pandemic and start to address some of these issues again, obviously the visitor survey is going to be one thing that we need one eye on as well. But in terms of how we work together as a council to address some of these issues, is, as I mentioned earlier, there's a toilet strategy group now that's looking at toilets in particular. We know about the weeds. We were only talking about the weeds this morning in terms of some areas. COVID has prevented staff getting out and addressing some of those issues. But I think formally through one of the working groups within the destination management plan, we've got to start revisiting these issues and the actions in that plan in order to address all these things that you've highlighted, which we're aware of. And as I say, as a tourism team, all we can do is bring them to these matters to the attention of the services and hope that the resources are there to actually address some of them.
Okay. Yeah. I'm trying to move on to the next part of this report, but Lyndon, do you want to come back, and then Wendy? Lyndon.
Right. Thank you, Chair. Just on point of clarification on the tourism tax, the First Minister recently actually refused to rule it out in his speech he made in the Senate. So just a point of clarification.
It's not really a matter for us, Lyndon, so we'll move on. Wendy?
Well, it was exactly that, because it is going to be an issue that Swansea could well have to face. And Lyndon is absolutely right. The First Minister raised this on as recently as the 18th of June. So, it is certainly on the cards, and it is certainly something that will impact on the tourist business in Swansea, and something that we're going to have to look at.
Okay, well, at the moment, he's just refused to rule it out. He hasn't put a proposal forward, but certainly if a proposal comes forward, then we can make it. We can have a look at that as a committee if you want to, and we can put a recommendation, or we can get a group together to have a look at the impact on Swansea. And I'm sure the cabinet will want to do that as well and consider that. And as Robert said, I've been to places where there's tourism taxes. San Francisco is awful because they don't actually include the tourism tax until you go to pay, which is pretty awful, but there we go. Okay, there's just one more question I wanted to ask on this one.
It's like the buses, down in Gower. That the bus to Gower used to be funded by Europe, but that money's now not longer available after Brexit. But that's not before us either.
Oh, okay. In terms of the report of the cabinet response to Peter Jones's policy committee on tourism, recommendation 3. There was a talk about the Gower off-road cycle route and how we promote that, and there was a talk about putting together some sort of promotion campaign, and the cabinet response was they were going to investigate grant funding for the network and grant funding for that network. I'm just wondering, has any progress been made in terms of the investigation of grant funding to promote that particular network?
If I may, Chair, it's probably not a question I can answer because I think it was colleagues in another section, countryside and right away, were pursuing that particular action.
So if we include it in a letter to Robert, maybe he can find out for us and respond to that, if that's okay, Robert.
Look, yes, you can do that. I think over the last 17 months, all the departments have been.
I understand. Yeah.
You know, so I just want to make that point. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not that the will is not there.
Yeah.
But it's been difficult.
I think now we're coming out of the pandemic and we're looking to promote the city. It's useful to ask how we're going to take that particular recommendation forward and how we're going to start looking for grants in the future. Maybe the better way of putting it then. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. I want to move on then to the other report on business and city promotion, if that's okay. I think rather than have someone introduce that report, we just go straight into questions. Who's actually here for that report? I can't remember now.
I think that'd be Claire.
Claire, yeah. Okay, is she there? Hugh Mowbray here, Claire James and Sue Woodward. Okay, so if I start off, I think that business, I often get people coming to me about looking, who are trying to set up a business or who want to expand their business, and they want to know where can they get advice and support. And I don't think it's particularly obvious where you actually go anymore. I mean, we used to have the information centre, of course, and the business centre in town in terms of that. I'm just wondering, how can we better signpost advice for small businesses who are looking for advice on funding and on education, how to educate, how to improve their business, that sort of thing. I know there is out there, but it doesn't appear to be any obvious routes into that. A lot of people struggle to find the route into that. Maybe Hugh would have an idea on that for us.
To be fair, I think that's one for Claire to answer.
Okay, Claire, then. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I can respond to that one. Yes, I would agree, and there have been quite a few changes recently. Up until a few months ago, basically, we would signpost to Business Wales, which is the Welsh Government provision. But as we've outlined in the report, we've actually got dedicated resource within the council again. So we've got 2 new officers that joined us a couple of months ago, and we've launched our new Business Swansea service. So the support available is as outlined in the report. There's a new council website going live tomorrow, and there are going to be new pages on there about the work that they're doing and how businesses can get in touch with them. They're doing a lot of work on social media. They've got a Twitter account, they've got a YouTube channel, and they're on LinkedIn. There's a dedicated email, businessswansea@swansea.gov.uk. So this is an area that we're really focusing on now, and you should see a lot more. And we have that resource there again now that can provide support to businesses, you know, speak to them and direct them to the support that they need, really. So, you know, quite a change for us, you know, a big improvement.
Oh, thanks. I was rather hoping the All Singing, All Dancing website was going to have something about that, which we can point people at, and I'm sure other councillors will welcome that as well, because I'm sure other people get similar requests in terms of support as well. Okay, so moving on to oh, sorry, Robert, you want to come in on that? Sorry.
No, just to confirm that, you know, as you say, the site is being launched tomorrow. It reflects in a way what we were talking about earlier, using IT better, and I think that is a much better way of doing it. You know, people like Thompson's Holidays got rid of the magazine just 2 years ago because everybody's doing it online. And I think people can do it online now with the department. If they want a face-to-face meeting, quite easily then to set up. But probably the quickest way to get in touch in the first way is to email or like Teams meetings, easy to arrange meetings with people.
Okay, I'm sure many businesses in the city will welcome that accessibility. Great. Okay, so on a bigger point now, the Velindre site. I'm just wondering what progress is being made on that as a prime business location. Are we getting anywhere in terms of marketing that site?
Yeah, if I can respond to that. Basically, just for context, really, Park Velindre is about 106 acres in total. Of this, 39.5 acres is employment land, which is made up of 12 plots, ranging in size from 0.5 to 2 hectares, or 1.2 to 4.9 acres, so it's quite sizable. It's obviously got direct access for the M4, so it's got an attractive park in that respect. And the first occupiers, DPD, are actually on site, and they took about 2.5 of the actual sites. It's been a very difficult last 18 months, as you can imagine, where most companies and businesses have been looking to actually sort of retract and survive the COVID and the recession. As I think, Chair, you mentioned, sort of the economy seems to be improving. There is now sort of a change of heart and a change of emphasis, and businesses are now looking to the future, which is really positive. And I can report that the first time in certainly the last 2 years, we are now getting quite a lot of interest in Velindre. We have 3 very live and very positive discussions ongoing. I obviously can't go into the names of those in terms of what they are, but in terms of we've got a local developer who is looking to create a mixed-use sort of site for life sciences, manufacturing and e-commerce. And that is an ongoing discussion. He's looking to move that forward speculatively, which is really positive. We've got a health inquiry, which is another one, which is an ongoing discussion, and we've just received a significant inquiry for a HQ for a high-tech company who do a lot of R&D as well. So that's an ongoing discussion, and they've asked us to sign a non-disclosure agreement to actually progress the discussions. So that is something which is moving forward. So I think those are 3 very live discussions which we haven't had for the last 18 months. So I think the change in the pace of the economy and the availability of this site, and it is a very good site. It's been well landscaped. It's in green surroundings, etc. So it is now starting to sort of see the benefits of the investment which has been made in the site. So that's the current position, really.
That's encouraging. Wendy, did you want to come in on this? You put your hand up a minute ago.
Sorry, no, I don't. I'm having big problems getting my hand down and various other things, so ignore me at the moment.
Okay, I was going to call Sue Jones in, but she's just gone off for a second. So my next question then is in terms of the pandemic, and how closely are we monitoring the situation in terms of businesses which are closing and trying to get that investment back, particularly in terms of the city centre. We've lost Debenhams, a number of other chains have gone as well. I'm just, do we have any ways we can sort of try to get that city centre back on track?
If I can respond to that as well, I think you're right. I think that there have been closures. Swansea's actually done a lot better than a number of towns and cities around the UK, to be honest. If you actually walk around the city, whilst there are vacancies, there are not as many as other cities. However, we can't rest on our laurels in that respect. We have been undertaking a repurposing report, which is looking at what are the key interventions Swansea needs to make to actually sort of put the city centre onto the right plane and make it fit for purpose for the future. So that's a piece of work which is now coming to a conclusion. That is going to Cabinet in September to look to approve the report, and then we will be looking at ways of actually delivering the various interventions which were set out in that report. So we've got a plan. As part of that work, we talk to a large number of retailers at the national level, that's the main decision-making point for most of these retailers, not locally. There was a very positive response to Swansea in terms of something like 72% of people actually wanted to stay in Swansea. The downside is there is quite a significant amount of lease expiries and other sort of break clauses, etc., which would affect Swansea if they were all exercised. But this is about making sure that there is a clear strategy and there's a clear understanding of what Swansea's doing, and I think the sort of the current work which is going on in terms of the arena, in terms of the 71-72 the Kingsway, which is just about to go on site, and the regeneration agenda, that has significantly improved Swansea's position and the understanding of Swansea across the UK, and we are getting a number of inquiries in that respect, and things like the quadrant. We're working with LaSalle, who are the managing agents for that, and we're having regular meetings with them to see how we can improve that. They've actually got some new lettings about to come into the quadrant, which has gone well, but as I said, we can't rest on our laurels. There's a long way to go, and we've got to continue working hard to make sure the city centre functions moving forward, and that means investment from colleagues in Welsh Government, etc., and we're setting up meetings with them to discuss how we fund some of these the interventions, which will come out through the repurposing report as well. So there's a lot of work being done, and there's a lot of work which still needs to be done in terms of PR on this, because making sure that the message of where Swansea is, what it's been doing in regeneration terms, it does get out there. We're working on a piece called the Swansea Story. We've got a big event coming up with the Estates Gazette, where we will be doing pre-recording interviews across Swansea to put out on the Estates Gazette interactive site, and that gets a significant number of hits, and it actually sort of can get to a lot more people than just the council could on its own. So that will be recorded in September and released in October. So there's a lot of work being done to profile Swansea as well. So it's keeping the momentum going, and once the arena finishes, that's going to generate sort of 200 events per annum plus, and that's going to generate footfall in the city centre, which supports businesses. In terms of the arena, we've currently got 9 commercial units outside of the arena, which is responsibility of the council, and now every one of those is now under offer to a local business, which are all good quality businesses. None of them are nationals, and that was part of the letting strategy to ensure that we maximise the opportunities for local businesses and took advantage of the circular economy in terms of that the money and any staff costs are reinvested into Swansea as well. So I think we're in a positive position. We've got more people interested in the arena units than we've got, which means things like this phase 2 of Swansea Central, things like the Castle Gardens units potentially, if that gets an approval to move forward, we have potential more tenants to look at for that as well. So I think we're in. We can't be. We've got to be cautious, but we're in a good position to move forward to meet the end of the recession and the economy starting to look towards the upturn, basically.
Okay, thanks you. Sue, you wanted to come in on food businesses?
Yes, thank you. On the report, you refer to the promotion of local food businesses with local products. And I just wondered, with the news now of the Gower salt marsh lamb having UK's protection for the UK, are there any other products within the area that maybe the council could promote?
I can come in and respond to that one. Yes, the Gower salt marsh lamb was fantastic news for Swansea, for the company and for the council, the team that worked on that, for achieving that, because this is the first product in the UK that has got this new UK protected status. So it's a fantastic story. And yes, that there are a lot of good quality local produce that we can promote and that we are promoting already through the Swansea Food Partnership that we've established. We're looking to expand this. We're getting some funding from the Economic Recovery Fund to have a local food coordinator, and the purpose of that is to really work with more local food producers and really promote their business. So definitely, yes, there's a lot. And if anybody's got any businesses that you specifically are aware of that you would like us to promote, please get in touch and let us know.
Okay, that's good. That's good news. Thank you, Claire. Yeah, Lyndon.
Thanks, Chair. I was obviously keenly interested in what Hugh had to say, and that's a lot of good news. And I saw the other day a presentation on the promotion of the city centre as well, which I thought was extremely good. It obviously we need to be looking at Debenhams as Peter mentioned. But the other thing that we've got like about 80 empty shops in the centre of Swansea, small shops, and that is a lot of shops, and really, you know, they need in some cases to be, obviously they need to be filled, and in my view probably individual shops that make Swansea a go-to destination, because they can go to different types of shops, unlike having like national chains where you could go to Swansea or Bristol and get the same product. But with that number of empty shops, we've got a big job to do.
Hugh, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, well, I don't disagree with that. I think one of the things that we've got is Swansea's got a very large amount of secondary and tertiary space, which in terms of retail will never, frankly, be retail again in reality. So in terms of changing uses, things like the Kingsway, where we've got the office developments moving forward there needs to be sort of complementary sort of elements to those office uses. But the more office uses we can get across that, and even in the core city centre in Oxford Street, we've got to sort of get a much more mixed economy in terms of moving some of the retail elements into other uses to make a sort of more vibrant mixed space across the whole of the city centre, and bringing in restaurants, bringing in other uses. And I would suggest that most of the vacancies are in the secondary and tertiary areas, and it's not comparing apples with apples if you look at other towns. And the core sort of the quadrant, the Oxford Street core areas are not as there's not as many vacancies in those areas as other towns, as I said earlier. But it's looking at how we can look at some of these other areas and how we can actually support them to change some of the retail uses into other uses, because that's got to be the way forward, and that's got to be sort of looked at as and there are various grants available to be able to do some of those works, and it's something which we try and work with as many sort of local landowners, local businesses as we can, to encourage them to stay in the city centre or to move into the core city centre, which is what we need to happen really to make it more sustainable.
Okay, Robert, do you want to come in?
You're on mute.
Robert, you're muted.
I was going to say, I won't repeat everything that Hugh said because he summed it up, but I was saying Swansea is better placed than most towns and cities throughout the United Kingdom. And that is basically because of the work we've been doing as a council throughout the pandemic, like the Arena, like the Palace Theatre, like the Albert Hall. You know, these are all being repurposed, whereas they were all looking run down previously. They will be opening up, and good tenants already signed up for those, so they're all let. But I think that the need will be, the Levelling Up report and things like that have said that the way people use city centres will be different. More people, more offices, more people living there, more people working. I think actually the student apartments, where we've seen about 4,000 of those, will be coming online. There will be more people living in the city centre. The businesses will relate to the demographics. And I think that new businesses will spring up with all those people coming into the city. It needs to be a young city. It needs to be alive. The hospitality industry will bounce back. People will enjoy it. And I think we will see these, and I'm confident that we will see some of the secondary and tertiary sites will have to be looked at and perhaps re-alter that to what it wants to be and what the needs are. So I'm as confident as I can be at this time. I think we're in a much better place than lots of other towns and cities because of the large primary companies that have gone. but they will be replaced. And I think the hub we put in the centre will also help footfall. When you get greater footfall, businesses thrive. Footfall has been cut down so much during the pandemic. It's been very difficult for those businesses to survive. Whilst furloughing has helped, etc., we now need to get back to getting the footfall back that we've lost and increase on that footfall. And the dwell time needs to be longer as well. Well aware of it. We are working on it, and I feel quite confident.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Jeff Jones?
Yeah, it's good news, really, that, shall we say, businesses are actually showing interest. It's a pity, really, we can't have details of who these businesses are. But I actually get from what Hugh was actually saying that, the large multinationals, shall we say, are not going to probably come back. I think people are buying a lot more online and so on, which is a big threat to them keeping stores on and so on. I agree with, what Robert actually said with regards to footfall. But really, the people who actually walk the streets of Swansea need to have money in their pockets as well. I do understand about the Kingsway, but the Kingsway is not coming online until 2023. So I'm a little bit worried about the time lapse and so on. With regards to, shall we say, these smaller shops and so on, when do you think we'll have details of who, shall we say, especially with the quadrant, are going to move into the quadrant?
Hugh?
I'm aware that the quadrant are in the process of actually signing up 2 national tenants for new tenants in the quadrant. Once those are signed, I'm sure we can sort of provide details to you of who those are. So that's quite a positive position. We're obviously sort of the talks that we've had with key retailers, because between Marks and Spencer's, Primark and the Debenhams unit, that was sort of one of the core sort of retail circuits, and maintaining that is a key issue, really. Primark trade extremely well in Swansea, and they potentially want to expand, not necessarily now, but certainly over the next couple of years. Marks and Spencer's has also trade well in Swansea generally, so that's another one. So trying to find a solution to the Debenhams issue is really important in that respect. And as people have already said, I think that the one of the key issues is at the moment Swansea sort of closes down at 5 o'clock, so it hasn't got an economy, even economy, except for Wine Street, really, in those sorts of areas. So the arena, if that's going to have 200 events per annum at least in there, that's going to bring a lot more people, a lot more tourists, a lot more people staying and spending money in the city centre as well. So it's that's the rationale for it being in that location. And as Councillor Francis Davis said, the benefits of that are that it's there, it's going to be finished very, very shortly, and it'll start trading very shortly. So not many cities who are facing this economic sort of struggle at the moment have got something like that, which is going to sort of restart or kickstart the core city centre with a bang, really. And if you haven't got that sort of thing, then food and beverage people wouldn't want to come. But whilst the food and beverage market is quite challenged at the moment, people are interested in Swansea because of the arena is about to start, and they know that ATG, as the council sort of preferred operator, will be running in excess of 200 events per annum. So there's a given market there for all the F&B units. So it's a real positive, and that is going to help us significantly.
Yeah, sorry, if I can just come in. I know we've got to, talk up this, and we should do anyway. But with regards to the arena, when are these 200 events going to come on stream? Because initially, for the first year, they're not going to achieve that figure, are they?
No, they won't achieve necessarily in the first year. The maturity point of the arena is year 3. Having said that, the arena is a similar size to the one in Hull, And in the first year, they far exceeded their business case, which the number of events set out in their business case. So I would anticipate that there will be a large number of events. We had a conversation with Ambassador Theatre Group this morning, and they are working very hard on their programming at the moment. So there's before long, we'll hopefully have some very good news on that front, which can be released. But I accept the point that they won't. 200 events is probably not going to happen in the first year, but it certainly should be close to 100 and building up to the 200 by the year 3 position. That's their business plan in terms of maturity.
Robert, do you want to come in on this?
Absolutely. It's Jeff was saying about it's going to be 2 years before the Kingsway comes online, but we've been working on it for quite a few years now. Now then, a lot of towns or cities have not even got anything coming online at all. In fact, the Albert Hall is online, the Palace will be online. I can go through, you all know the major schemes. Our capital budget is enormous compared to anywhere else in Wales and probably a lot of cities throughout the country. So we are better placed because we are that further forward. So that might be, 2003. But other people will probably be looking at 2007 or 2008. And so therefore we're ahead of the curve. And I think the student apartments that have already been built will bring those people in. And the amount of spend that they make in the city, and not only that, parents coming to visit them, family coming to visit them, friends coming to visit them, I would be very surprised if we don't see a lot of new businesses open to deal with that influx of population in the city centre. So I'm reasonably comfortable. You can't be 100% comfortable, but I'm reasonably comfortable that Swansea's future is going to go the right way, not the wrong way.
Okay, Wendy.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, just listening to what has been said, it's very, very interesting because there's a lot of positivity and obviously that has to be welcomed. I just wondered if it was possible to draw a conclusion that as a city centre, as we once knew it, and as is probably the case elsewhere, we are no longer going to be dependent on the draw of these big multiple chain stores. We will retain Marks and Spencer's, presumably. We will retain Primark, and hopefully they will continue to flourish. But with all the student population, with all the kinds of changes that have been mentioned, it looks as though the city centre is going to change to a more perhaps restaurant, cafe, food orientated city centre, rather than perhaps drawing in people for the shopping experience. I would suggest if you want a shopping experience and you don't want chain stores, large multiples, then Mumbles is doing a fantastic job for Swansea. It is flourishing. And if you do want the big chain stores, then of course the option is these days to go to an out of town location, such as Park Trustor or such as Morpher. So from what you are saying, it seems to me we are going to have a completely different city centre with a different focus and with a far less concentrated sort of attention on the major stores, apart from, as I say, Marks and Spencer's and maybe Primark. Hopefully the market will itself, which is a draw, will remain. But let's hope everything pans out and we are successful in Swansea. There are going to be a lot of things that are going to draw people in. So we have to hope that this perhaps new focus on food outlets, restaurants, cafes will generate people coming into the city centre, as will presumably student accommodation.
Robert, do you want to come in on that one? Robert, you're muted. Robert, you muted.
It's twice now, sorry about that. it's going to be a very different city centre, not just Swansea, throughout the country. The students that will be there will be a cross-section of communities, and a lot of those are big spenders in the city centre. The hospitality will be there. We'll have different restaurants there that will make more dwell time within the city centre, I believe. The university will increase, therefore is more jobs for academics as well within the universities we have in Swansea. But they will create the businesses coming out of there, hopefully will stay in Swansea with the tech industries that will be created there as well. And I think that's important. You know, many people go shopping to Bath and they will go there for a few days. Not because you've got a huge range of shops, although they've got good shops, but they go there for the culture of it. They go there because it's a nice city to be. And I think people will hopefully come to Swansea because it will be a nice city with more greening. It's lovely to see the sign go up on top of the Potter's Wheel. More greening is needed in the city, you know, and that people will want to have a pleasant environment in which to come and use the city. There will be more city breaks. We will have more attractions for people to see. So I think the way forward is culture, leisure, mixing that, but a pleasant city to visit and a safe city to visit. And I think that having more people living in the city will make our streets safer, because when you have people around, people feel safer. Is when you got to walk down the street and there's nobody on that street and there's lanes leading off them. So, you know, Wendy says about we should go to Park Trostre. Now, Debenhams is closed in Park Trostre. British Homes went from Park Trostre. I haven't been to Park Trostre since before the pandemic, but I don't think if I went back there tomorrow, it would not be the Trostre that I last visited, because these closures are everywhere. People are using online, and I don't think that's going to stop from people. In fact, it will probably expand because it's convenient and people are looking for convenience. But I'm confident that Swansea is going the right way and ahead of the curve.
Okay, Hugh, very quickly, we're going to wind this up now.
Okay, sorry, I just I wanted to agree with what Robert was saying, but also say that sort of the death of retailing is a little bit premature, to be honest with you. I think that sort of there's a new force of retailing. There'd be new retailers coming forward to replace some of the old ones, but it's not good making the same mistakes across the whole country, really. You can't have a single-use retail town again. I think that's one element which has gone. So mixing retail with these other uses and making a more lively town centre is fundamental, and also the environment point, the green point. If you want to have a city where people work and live, you've got to have an environment which is fit for people to live in, and that is fundamental. So in terms of looking at that, and we can present to you in due course the repurposing report, I guess, which looks at lots of these things and what key interventions Swansea needs to make to move forward, alongside all the work it's been doing in terms of the current regeneration strategy as well.
We may hold you to that prediction on the future of retail, but if you could circulate that repurposing report, that would be very helpful. If that's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to wind this up, this particular part of the agenda up now. Can I thank all the officers and Robert Francis Davies for coming along and answering the questions, and it's been very useful, very interesting session. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to move on to the next item on the agenda then, which is the Scrutiny Performance Panel Progress Report. And this month we're looking at service improvement and finance. As Chris Holly is not available, I think Jeff Jones has agreed to answer any questions on this, or maybe say a few words about it.
You finished with me now, Peter?
I have. Thank you, Robert. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Jeff, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah, and yeah, thanks to Chris for passing it over. It's been a long meeting, and I appreciate a couple of points. A lot of it surrounds the quarter three report that the Finance Committee actually went to. I think it starts off by actually saying that We've lost some income actually coming in, which the Welsh Government, 2.2 million, has actually met now. It doesn't say that in the report, but I think it's been met. It's highlighted that we're going to borrow, and we'll borrow hundreds of millions of pounds. I think Robert Francis Davies has just actually said that. I think Swansea is probably the highest authority with the highest borrowing of any authority in Wales. We would like to borrow a lot of the money that we actually need, but I understand that we can't do at the present time, even though interests are actually low at the present time, and there is a risk that interest rates are actually going to go up shortly. There's a general fund expenditure which is 115 million at the present time. Again, a lot of it actually relates to the city deal, the arena and the field hospital. Again, some of that money is actually being met by the Welsh Government. Also as well, with regards to 50 million in reserves, a lot of this is actually down to grants and parallel funding from the Welsh Government. Capital financing costs are actually down at the present time. That's due to a lot of capital projects not actually being progressed, but undoubtedly, those costs are actually going to rise. Again, on a positive note, there was a council tax deficit of 2.5 million, but again, the Welsh Government have actually met this. Some of the other parts in there was the corporate complaints. Details of the report really were impacted by the pandemic, but I think another report's actually going to be brought to the committee, and then it will be discussed. We mentioned in the last item really with regards to the Kingsway, that was actually held in a closed session, unfortunately, as far as I'm concerned, but it had to be. But I think everybody in the panel actually found that extremely fruitful. Housing standards again actually affected, with the Welsh Housing Quality Standards Programme affected by COVID. But on a present note, there was a 17% increase in compliance since the last report, and the report actually ended with the Welsh language. Council doing a lot of work here to actually promote it. One question that was actually asked though with regards to attracting staff, to the local authority, would it work against us really with regards to Welsh language? And that's it. I don't know if anybody's got any questions.
Anybody want to raise any questions on the report? No? Thank you, Jeff, for that presentation. That's very helpful and very useful. The work of the panel is very, very good, and certainly carry on with that, hopefully. Okay, thanks for that. So the next item is the Scrutiny Annual Report, which is the report which is going to be presented to Council on the 2nd of September. If anyone has any comments now or later, please let us know. Anybody want to say anything at the moment on that report? No? Okay. Thank you for that. Then that will go to Council next month. And then we have the membership of scrutiny panels and working groups. Councillor Joe Hale has been added to the Natural Environment Performance Panel. I don't think there's any other changes to report on that. And then we have the scrutiny work programme. Just to highlight that one of the letters at the back of the agenda is relating to the Education and Scrutiny Performance Panel, basically the scrutiny of ERU, which is the regional partnership, which is being replaced. And I think the committee needs to be aware of that, and no doubt we'll be having further reports on what's going to replace us and how we're going to be scrutinising it in the future. And also just to note that Chris Holly's panel is also going to be looking at the planning service at some time in the future as well. The next meeting of this committee, I think we're looking at litter and community cleansing with Mark Thomas, and energy policy, including generation supply and district heating with Andrea Lewis. And then just the scrutiny letters to note at the end as well. So has anybody got anything they want to say on any of those items? No? In that case, can I thank you all for attending? Item 12, upcoming scrutiny panel meetings as well. Can I thank you all for coming and for attending, and if you're going on holiday, have an enjoyable holiday. So thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Call the meeting to an end.
Thank you.
Cheers.